The British Parliament has passed a bill that will allow Prime Minister Theresa May to start talks to leave the European Union. The Queen will now need to sign that into law, and that will clear the way for the Prime Minister to trigger Article 50 to begin the Brexit process. May has said she will trigger Article 50 by the end of this month. But on this side of the pond, it's tough for us to follow all of this. Luckily, we have in studio with us the Honorary Consul of the United Kingdom for Missouri, Mark Sutherland. Good to see you. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to San Diego.
Well, it's lovely.
We have a sunny day for you finally.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
We gave you the first few cloudy days here so you'd feel at home.
Right, now
right?
I don't want to leave.
Right,
It's really
exactly.
nice.
Mark, this is kind of big news, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, and you weren't like all in for Brexit.
I mean, since I live in the U.S., I definitely let everybody back at home make their own decisions and support them how they see fit. But yeah, I've been watching it, and I was over there right after Brexit last year when the vote initially happened. And there's a lot of things that have happened that brought us to this point. But you know, UKIP and others were saying we need to be out of the EU. And then Cameron put it up for a vote for the people. He's like, you know, this is not a decision that I should be making. This should be a decision of the British people. And put it up for the vote, and the people voted for Brexit. At which point Theresa May came in as our Prime Minister and started the process to get through the rule of law, all the things that should happen to where we can get to today, where Parliament has said, both the House of Lords and the House of Commons have said, you can proceed with Article 50, which is part of the EU rules that will allow the negotiations to start, 2 years of negotiations, for Britain to exit the EU under whatever arrangement is negotiated between Britain and the rest of the EU parties.
Because right after this all went down, we heard a lot of backlash from press saying this would be tragic for Europe.
Well, I mean, Europe's going to survive. I mean, Britain's the fifth largest economy in the world. They'll do fine. It's actually going to probably be better for the US-UK relationship. But Europe's going to do what Europe is going to do.
So why would this be better for the US-UK relationship?
So once Britain leaves the EU, so the last 25 years or so, all trade negotiations have had to happen through the EU because Britain has been a member. Once Britain is no longer in the EU, Britain gets to decide what their trade relationships are with the EU, with the United States, with any other party around the world. There is a special relationship that has been in place. Well, we kind of had a little spat back in the, 1812, 1776.
Yeah.
Our relationship's got a lot better since then, and it is an incredibly strong relationship, both politically, culturally, and economically. Mm-hmm. And with Britain being able to do their own trade relationship, the one with America is top of the list. And because of that, the shared values, because of the shared heritage, my contention, the contentions of many others, is it's going to be good for trade as a whole and for a much stronger working relationship than we've had the last 25, 30 years.
Interesting. Is there any chance that the Queen will not assent?
The Queen allows the parliamentary process and the Constitution to operate. And even though it's not a given, she will honor the process, and everybody anticipates.
And that's supposed to happen
giving
today.
Royal assent. Royal assent within hours is what we've heard. I don't believe it's happened yet.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 24 hours that assent is given. And then it's up to Prime Minister May when Article 50 is invoked, and then the parties between Europe and Britain will decide when actual negotiations start. But Prime Minister's promised by the end of the month.
Europe has been, ahead of the United States in terms of taking in mass amounts of refugees and having this very tolerant attitude, I guess, mm-hmm. toward Islam. I remember being there decades ago, frankly, and there were many Muslims there at the time, mostly Turkish, if mm-hmm. I remember correctly. But that number has dramatically increased, and we've seen the results of that, Mark. It's interesting to me that the United States is sort of behind on this, and the United States is sort of still in this honeymoon period with the whole idea, this affinity for taking in refugees and for the fact that they believe that Western culture can mix well with mm-hmm. Islam. Jury's still out on that, but in Europe, they've experienced some very serious problems, and we've watched this. One of the things that I thought was very interesting was that the EU court ruled, I believe this week, that businesses can ban headscarves. Now, I don't think that that would happen here in the United States, so that makes me very surprised, and I wondered if you could help us understand where they are sociologically, really, in this particular cultural battle.
Yeah, I mean, so Britain as a whole and Europe has always been very welcoming. And I think there's been some situations, and it's not majority of immigrants, but I mean, if you look at why Brexit happened, immigration was an issue for a lot of people, and the freedom of movement across borders, and Britain wanting to be able to control who can come into their country and who shouldn't. And there's a huge amount of peace-loving Muslims in Britain who function as a great member of society, and you have a few people that you have issues with, and you've had that throughout history. It's not just Muslims. It's, you know, there were issues with terrorism when I was growing up in Britain in the 80s. So I think they're trying to figure out, how do we keep our diversity, our welcomingness, our open arms, but also put in some limitations that just make sense from a safety perspective. I think that's kind of what you're seeing go on in Europe at the
Help me
present
understand
time.
why banning headscarves makes things safer.
That I don't know. I haven't really looked at the issue. I think it's just they want to be able, from a security perspective, be able to see people's faces and be able to know, you know, who is that walking through this checkpoint, or who is that who's in an area at this point in time. I think it really does come down to security. It's got nothing to do with religion. It's just simply we need to be able to see people's faces.
And so if you were to put maybe advice out there for the United States as they're grappling with these cultural conflicts as they are, what would your advice be?
I mean, if you look at the immigration issue right now with the restrictions that are being placed in America, you know, when that happened, Britain's first response was, okay, are British nationals okay? Can we still have, because of the common values and the relationship, can British nationals still come in? That was good. Okay, how about British dual nationals? Can they come in? And that was fine. And then, you know, kind of figuring out, okay, well, this isn't a policy that Britain would put in place, but this is America's issue. And that's the British government's position, is that America gets to decide what its own immigration policy is. And if they think that things work best for America, that is America's decision. That is American voters' decision to make, as they do every 2 to 4 years. And so Britain just hopes that that special relationship continues, and we're going to proactively work to ensure that our citizens are not impacted negatively by the immigration policies that America puts in place.
It's exciting times because
It's never boring, is it?
No, it's never boring, and I think that the increased relationship, increased business between the two.
Yeah.
You as a consul in Missouri, that's just the coolest thing ever, Mark. Thank you so much. Congratulations on
Thank you.
that.